Welcome to Ask a Construction Health and Safety Expert with Deb Moskal and Dave Dametto. I'm your host, Ken Rayner. This 5-part series is designed to give new Ontario construction firms the essential health and safety information needed to keep workers healthy and safe and businesses compliant. Each year, IHSA welcomes around 10,000 new construction firms through automatic membership when they register with WSIB. And that membership gives you and your new construction business access to low or no-cost training, tools, and expert guidance. And this series is part of that support. And many of the questions we're going to cover come directly from Ontario construction companies with less than 5 employees. Companies just like yours. Having a competent supervisor on site is one of the keys to reducing fatalities and injuries in Ontario's construction industry. And on today's episode, we're going to talk to our experts about the aspects of competent supervising and how that role significantly contributes to a healthy and safe workplace. All right, welcome to our experts, Deb and Dave. Dave, as we've done before, we're starting with the basics. So why don't we start with the definition of a supervisor under Ontario's Occupational Health and Safety Act?
Well, Ken, a supervisor under the Act means a person who has charge of a workplace or authority over the worker. Again, that's that legal definition. We find within our construction industry, though, we don't always call them a supervisor. Some companies will call them a foreman, superintendent, and in some cases, a lead hand can be considered a supervisor if they're directing work or if they're directing a worker.
And those are some names, but it also is possible that someone may not be called anything and still be a supervisor. If you have a 20-year-old that's directing 2 18-year-olds on a project and has never been told they're the supervisor, but they're directing the work, de facto, they're the supervisor.
They could be, right?
They could be.
The owner of the company says, hey, can you just take care of this while I'm away? And again, they could be considered the supervisor. And as well as I want to point out, Ken, the owner, especially with our small businesses, sometimes they are the supervisor as well in a lot of cases.
In many cases, for sure. Now, Deb, what about the term, and I know we've gone over this a couple times. We went over it in episode 1. I think we've touched on it in episode 3 as well. How is the term competent person defined in Ontario's Occupational Health and Safety Act?
Right. So when we talk about competent person, we're referring to someone who has the knowledge, training, and experience to organize the work and the performance of the work. They're familiar with the Act and any applicable regulations that would apply, as well as has knowledge of any actual or potential danger to health or safety to the workers in that workplace. And so what's important for us to make sure we stress here is it's an and requirement. So you have to meet all 3 of those criteria in order to be deemed to be competent.
Okay. Now, how about we put those 2 together? So we had the definition of a supervisor, definition of a competent person. How does the definition of a competent person apply to a supervisor in the workplace?
Well, Ken, we look at it as knowledge and experience, right? So a competent supervisor must have a thorough understanding of the task that their team is performing, as well as the potential risks associated with those tasks. They need to be familiar with the legislation that applies to the work, as well as the standards when it comes to procedures, safe work practices, and regulations. They should have the experience in both the technical aspects of the work, but also be able to manage and guiding their workers through those tasks.
I think when we talk about, training and qualifications, what we're really looking for is making sure they have, training in the tasks they're going to be supervising for sure, so that they're able to identify hazards, implement proper safety protocols, and respond effectively if an emergency situation was to arise. I think coupled with that, or along the same line, if you will, when we talk about the ability to identify hazards and manage risks, it's about being able to, yes, identify the hazard, but make sure we take those appropriate actions to mitigate and eliminate hazards. If we're utilizing PPE as a control, as an example, to make sure it's the proper PPE, that it's in compliance with applicable standards, and that we're following safe work practices and procedures as required.
Yeah, and how do we do that, Deb? We're going to have to be able to communicate, right? So one of the biggest things that the supervisor has to do is communicate. So communicate clearly safety expectations, procedures, as well as the potential risks that the workers are going to be exposed to. But they also have to be able to give clear direction, provide feedback, and foster that open door environment that I like to say, so workers feel comfortable coming to the supervisor if they've got a question, if they've got, or if they've identified a hazard, or just to be able to say, hey, you know what, hey, I'm not sure about how to do something. Supervisor leadership skills is huge. A competent supervisor is able to manage effectively their team, be able to motivate them not only to do the job, but to do the job safely. Be able to ensure that the safety standards are being put into play by their workers, and be able to recognize when the workers need support. Because sometimes a worker, they don't want to ask their supervisor for help because they're going to say, hey, he doesn't think or she doesn't think I know what I'm doing. But we want to be able to, let them have that opportunity to come to me and say, hey, you know what, I don't understand. Can you please explain it to me again?
And I think part of that also is accountability for the supervisor. We've talked about this in previous episodes as well, but there is a legal requirement here, and I don't want to scare anybody. That's not the intent of this by any means. But when we talk about due diligence and making sure that we've done everything reasonable proactively, one of the reasons we want to do that is first to protect the workers, but also you do have a legal requirement here where if you're not meeting due diligence, there is a potential for an individual or an organization to, be charged or fined. And some of those fines that can be applied and charges can be very, very significant to an individual or an organization.
Good things to remember. Okay, so, we've got our new construction companies. They're looking to get going with the work, and they want to start their business. But it is also really important to understand the legislation that applies to their work, particularly as the employer, as that owner of the organization, the person that could be supervising the work. So Dave, what's the workplace legislation that a supervisor on a construction project in Ontario really must be familiar with?
Well, Ken, there's really not just one regulation or one part of legislation. There's quite a few of them that can apply. So the overall, we start off with the Occupational Health and Safety Act. It's going to tell us what the roles and responsibilities, the rights and duties of our workplace parties. It will speak to Ministry of Labor and their powers under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. But for our construction companies, we can start off with Regulation 21391, which is our construction regulations. It's going to tell us what we have to do on our construction sites. What are the rules that we have to follow? Some of our construction firms will also have to fall under the industrial regulation, Regulation 851. If you've got a yard, an office, or a shop, they would fall under the industrial regulations. And I may be going into an industrial establishment to be able to do some work. So I'd have to follow some rules in those rules as well. WHMIS regulations, Regulation 860. We spoke about that in one of our other episodes. So what are the rules that we have to follow if we're using or exposed to hazardous materials? Worker training when it comes to WHMIS. So we spoke about that previously. Regulation 1101, which is our first aid regulations. Depending on the number of workers I have, what type of training do they need? What are the first aid supplies that I have to be able to have for those workers in case somebody gets injured? A fairly recent regulation, Regulation 42021, which is our reporting requirements to the Ministry of Labor. I may have to report to the Ministry of Labor in certain timelines. The reports are going to have to contain certain elements to be as part of those reports. As well as we spoke about in one of our other episodes, our confined space regulations, Regulation 63205, specific to working in confined spaces. But again, our construction firms, depending on the work that they're doing, they're going to have to be familiar with the legislation that applies to them.
Okay, then how can they then become familiar with that legislation, Dave?
Well, a couple of ways, and there's a few of them. IHSA has training sessions that can point you in the right direction. Some of our programs will teach you how to navigate through the different regulations, navigate through the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Regulations are typically designed a certain way or the same way, sections, subsection, clauses, subclauses. They're indexed that we're able to utilize, and some of our training programs will be able to help you do that. IHSA has consultants all throughout the province. So from Kenora to Ottawa and everywhere in between, we've got a consultant that can be able to help you. As well as within IHSA, we have subject matter experts in ergonomics, in occupational health. We have people that can help you with that there as well. We've got podcasts that can be utilized, be able to identify the health and safety duties and responsibilities of our workplace parties. As your company grows, our labor management network, specifically with the industry that you're working in, you're going to be speaking to people who have the same interests as you. And from there, you're going to see legislative changes, and you'll be informed of legislative changes within our industry. You can participate in audits or inspections. Again, this is where our safety consultants can come out and give you another set of eyes when you're going out onto your sites to be able to see if you're in compliance or not in compliance, and they can point you into the right direction and point you to the sections of the regulations that would apply. One of the other things that we have is our health and safety magazine. Great tool to utilize. And what does it charge? What do we charge for that?
I believe that's free.
Free. That's one of the
That's
other
the best charge.
Yeah, right. It's
It is.
and and we will send it to you. Right. It's available. It's a great resource to be able to utilize.
Okay. Dave, I want to paint the picture of a perfect world, okay? So in a perfect world, when is the best time for a supervisor to take the training and do some of the things that you mentioned?
So in my perfect health and safety world, Ken, the supervisor gets trained before they become the supervisor. We know that doesn't always happen. So if I'm an employer and I know that my company's going to grow, I might need somebody else to look after a job, or maybe I've got multiple jobs on the go. I need somebody there to be able to take care of it for me. I have to ensure that person has been trained. And again, we spoke in other episodes, health and safety awareness training in 5 steps for supervisors, IHSA's basics of supervisor training. This is the start where you need to get these workers involved in.
Okay. Let's change it up a little bit. Maybe let's go a little high level. Can we talk just about the elements of supervision? And I think this is applicable whether you are working on a construction project, whether you're managing a team of, a PLTN lineman, so they're all the same. But what are those elements of supervision in the workplace? Deb, what would you say?
So broadly, I would say planning, organizing, directing, and controlling work would be 4 buckets.
Okay, so let's get into a little bit of each one if we could. So can we, Dave and Deb, explain each element and how it applies to a supervisor? So we've got planning, organizing, directing, and controlling. Let's talk about each one.
Sure. So when we talk about planning, we're talking about taking the larger tasks and trying to break them down into smaller, more manageable tasks to carry out. So you're looking at, what are your requirements for material? What are your requirements for, equipment? How many workers do we need for a task? We want to make sure we identify health and safety requirements or potential hazards that can come up, and prepare our work schedule. Make sure we're going to be working in compliance with applicable safe work practices, safe job procedures that, may be the expectation of the association or the organization. When we get into a little more detail on it on the organization, so we're going to make sure we allocate our resources properly, confirm the controls that we require are going to be in place, and create our hazard assessment with our specific tasks, and make sure that work is going to be executed according to the plan.
Yeah, so there's the first 2, right? Yeah. The next part, now that we've planned and we've organized, we're going to have to start directing. We've looked at workers, we've got the material in place, so now what do we have to do? Well, we're going to have to communicate that plan to those workers and others, because we may have subcontractors on our sites as well. We're going to look at the job hazard analysis, and now we're going to look at any applicable training that has to come into play. It may be a site safety orientation that's going to go over what the rules are, what the hazards are, and what the control measures are in place for those specific hazards. We want to make sure that we're conducting those hazard assessments, and we spoke to it in other episodes, how vitally important they are to be able to identify the hazards and then put the control measures in place to ensure our workers are protected. Controlling means making adjustments, confirming that controls have been implemented. So as a supervisor, I'm overseeing the entire project. So I want to make sure those safe work practices, safe job procedures are being followed by my workers. I may have to conduct health and safety talks. We call them safety talks, toolbox talks, whatever you want to call them. But that's all part of controlling. When I see something that isn't correct, I want to make sure I'm having that talk. I'm going to look for feedback from my workers as part of my controlling, because I'm going to ask them, how is this working? Is this procedure working? Is there something that you think that might work better? And we're going to look at that as a group, and we'll say, you know what, yeah, that is a better idea. I want to make sure that my workers feel that they can come to me as a supervisor, as that open door policy that we spoke to before, and they're not afraid to be able to do that, to get that information to them.
Okay, so the 4 elements of supervision. We know that's not all, right, Dave?
Yeah.
There are critical safety tasks, in particular on a construction project, that a supervisor must be responsible for. What are those?
Well, we talk about buckets. So communicating, inspecting, investigating, and enforcing are what we consider those safety tasks that have to be there. I can't stress enough the communication part of it. As a supervisor, you're responsible for, again, communicating what those hazards are and being able to ensure that the workers are working safely with the safe work practices and procedures. As a supervisor, communicating your health and safety program. So that health and safety management system that we've put in play that we spoke about in other episodes, again, the rules, responsibilities, safe work practices, safe job procedures, I'm promoting that. I'm promoting that safe work environment for my workers. Some of our emergency response plans, what we have to have in place for our specific projects. I want to be able to ensure that the workers know what to do in case of an emergency. It could be something as complicated as a fall protection work plan, safety plan that we have to have in place. As well as I'm going to have to investigate and inspect. So the inspection part of it, we'll talk more about it, but that's important. But also investigating if workers aren't following the rules or if something's gone wrong, I want to make sure I'm doing those investigations.
Okay, and I appreciate that. That's at least the second time you've really honed in on communication. So
Yeah.
that's got to be a critical element. You also mentioned inspections. So let's delve into that. What does a supervisor need to inspect? And when do inspections need to be completed?
So, Ken, you mentioned previously about minimum standards. You've mentioned that in a few of our episodes. The regulations, the Act, are the minimum standards. So on our construction regulations, it speaks to a supervisor inspecting the workplace at least weekly. We know our construction sites change. So in a lot of cases, we're going to have to do inspections more than once a week. It may be 2-3 times a week. But again, we want to make sure that those inspections are happening to be able to identify changes within our work environment that could affect the workers' health and safety.
Okay. Deb, what about the requirement to investigate?
Right. So as a supervisor, you will be involved in investigations. So some of the things we investigate are hazards that are reported to us, near misses and incidents. And then as well, if there's any work refusals, we would want to make sure we investigate those as well.
Okay. And how about this? Let me make sure the word detailed is in here because I think that's very important. Deb, what are the benefits of conducting a detailed investigation?
The benefit is that it allows us to make sure we continue to improve health and safety within the organization. A detailed investigation allows us to get to the root cause as to what contributed to that incident and really identify where our system failure is. And when I say that, I mean, there's a gap that occurred along the way. Somewhere in our system, in our process, it broke. And so we want to make sure that we identify where that went wrong on us and correct our system to make sure that it's going to function properly. So you do want to do the detailed investigation. We don't want to be superficial on this at all, even if it's a hazard. That's a proactive report. Nobody's gotten hurt. It allows us to really dig into how did this hazard arise and make sure we actually correct the root cause of why that hazard became present in the workplace. So detailed investigation, as you said, is extremely critical to continue to improve health and safety, to continue the dialogue internally and build a robust health and safety culture and help to secure the financial interest of the organization as well.
Okay. Dave, I'm going to give a tougher one to you. Enforcing safety rules. So, the employer or the supervisor is communicating what they believe to be clear information. There's an expectation that all of the workers are going to follow it just as it's laid out, but that's not really the reality, right? So recognizing that enforcing safety rules can be a challenging task for a supervisor. Why is it so critical to enforce safety rules in a workplace?
Well, Ken, the Occupational Health and Safety Act is quite clear when it comes to this. It says the supervisor is responsible to ensure workers work in a manner that complies with the Occupational Health and Safety Act and its regulation. It ensures workers wears the proper equipment, they're following proper procedures that the employer requires to be used. This means that the supervisor has to, so that word shall we keep talking about in legislation, that they have to enforce those rules. Enforcing the rules is critical for the supervisor. It ensures the well-being of our workers. It supports legal compliance. It's going to reduce costs because we're not going to have any slowdowns or any shutdowns within our work. And it's going to be more productive for my work environment. When the supervisor is maintaining those safety standards or ensuring that those safety standards are maintained, it's going to keep our workers safe. And that's at the end of the day what we want to do.
Absolutely. And I got a great piece of advice many years ago from a labor lawyer that really changed my mindset, I think, on discipline, which was discipline, when it's applied properly, is always meant to correct behavior. It's never meant as punishment, right? So if we can keep that maybe mindset as we look to enforce health and safety rules, that it's about correcting that behavior, and the behavior should be associated with keeping the workers safe. So it should be for the workers' benefit, for the workplace's benefit. It's not about punishment, right?
No, not at all. And sometimes workers will perceive it as that, but if we've got that positive health and safety culture, and maybe even just the way we're enforcing those rules can go a long way in enforcing it with the workers, right? Ensuring that they understand why we're doing it.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Okay, with every episode we've done a bunch of questions from new Ontario construction businesses that they've submitted to us. This particular episode probably had some of the most questions that were submitted. So this is a very popular topic. Let's go through some of those. Deb, question being, if I took IHSA's Basics of Supervising, what additional information would I learn?
It's a really good question. As we said, it's a very popular program. It's an important program. It is 2 days. So what we do on day one is we really spend a lot of time talking about how to navigate the Act and regulations. So we don't expect supervisors to have the book memorized. That would be very unreasonable.
Yep.
But what we do expect is that they are able to find and source information in a timely manner. So we spend quite a bit of time on that. We talk about the main workplace parties. So we'll talk about constructors, employers, supervisors, workers, and their responsibilities under the Act. We talk about worker rights. We talk about the Ministry of Labor and what to expect should an inspector arrive, in your office or on your job site, what they can do, who they might ask to speak with, and kind of what that process would look like. We talk about orders and what those mean and the various types that can be issued. And we spend quite a bit of time on due diligence, being very proactive, and how to document your activities. And we talk about the importance of supervisor logbooks and, effective communication in there. So if you're a member for IHSA, if you come to one of our offices, it's a free program. It's a free 2-day program, which helps set you down the path towards competency, keeping in mind that just because I take a course, it doesn't mean I am competent, as we talked about earlier, right?
Yep.
So it's a multifaceted definition, but it's a really good program to help to make sure that you reach the point of competency.
Okay. Dave, next question. Interesting one because Deb touched on this earlier, talking about increased fines over the past couple of years, talking about the potential for jail time. How do I protect myself from fines or charges from the ministry as a supervisor?
So Ken, we hear the words due diligence. And what does due diligence mean? So if you're looking under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, due diligence under Section 25 for an employer, Section 27 for a supervisor, taking every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of the worker. So what have we done? What would a reasonable person do? So what's your defense? From the perspective of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, due diligence has to be there beforehand. So did you take every precaution reasonable before the accident happened? it's impossible to be able to prove that you did everything reasonable after the fact. If you don't have all your ducks in line, which means your health and safety policy in place, your occupational health and safety program that's going to spell out all the different elements like hazard assessment controls. If that isn't done beforehand, you're not going to be able to prove your due diligence.
Deb, what other resources does IHSA have for supervisors?
Right. So in addition to the Basics of Supervising program, we also have another program similar to that, communication skills for supervising health and safety. And in the content of that program, we talk about interviewing techniques. We have participants interview each other. We talk about the importance of safety talks and communication, and they actually deliver safety talks to one another. We do get more into the logbook and the importance of the supervisor logbook and keeping documentation. And we actually provide a copy of the logbook actually in that program as well. We have an incident investigation and reporting program, which is very good to provide some more context and details around how to and the importance of those aspects. We have our M029 manual, the Bible as you referred to it in another episode, which is different topics in health and safety and information there. We have our safety talk book. We have our small business resource page. So if you go to the IHSA website, scroll down a little bit, click on small business, you'll have access to a variety of templates and documents to help you. Our podcasts. So we have various podcasts on this. Episode 22, as an example, is the competent supervisor. 23 being identifying and addressing hazards for the supervisor. And there's a few others in there as well that would be good to look at. And so I think, there's a number of resources there that can be utilized to really support supervisors, not only to the point of helping them become competent, but also once they're in that role to just kind of keep the development and keep the eyes on safety and assist them down the road as well.
Excellent. And that Competent Supervisor podcast is by far and away our #1 podcast.
Excellent.
So again, this topic is of great interest, I know, to industry, and I'm glad we're giving supervisors some additional information on how we can help and how they can help themselves. Dave, this next one's really interesting. It must come from someone who maybe has recently become a supervisor. So the question is, Dave, what mistakes do new supervisors commonly make when managing health and safety?
Well, Ken, I'd like to look at two of them specifically. And one, I wrote down common sense. So the supervisor thinks that it's common sense, but in some cases it's not, right? It's up to the supervisor to ensure that they give instructions to those workers when it comes to the tasks that have to be performed. So whether it be through our safe work practices, safe job procedures, through our safety talks, or monitoring like we spoke about, or communicating, that's all part of the supervisor safety task. So thinking that everybody should know is not something that you can do. That's a common mistake. Another common mistake, Ken, and I understand why it happens is for the supervisors, but it's thinking about production only, because we have to get the job done on time, on budget, but focusing solely on production and not taking health and safety as a big part of that is probably it is a big common mistake that our supervisors make when they're looking at it.
Okay. Deb, Dave, thank you so much for sharing your more than 50 years of combined experience in Ontario's construction health and safety with our new employers. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for watching another episode of Ask a Construction Health and Safety Expert with Deb Moskal and Dave Dametto. IHSA is proud to support Ontario's construction industry, and we're proud to provide you with the tools and training you need to keep your workers healthy and safe and your business compliant. For more trusted resources and information, visit us at IHSA.ca.